Hello everyone, I am Sally Benjamin and I'll be taking you through hooks. So what are hooks? Hooks are React functions that allow you to use the features that React offers, like instant re-rendering, that's what reload, and state management, and among others, like using getting parameter values from the parameters, or rather the endpoints that you write in React Router DOM. There are more hooks that maybe I haven't talked about, but those ones we'll be looking at today. We'll be looking at specifically 4 hooks, which is one to manage state, that is use state. Then you look at the use effect hook, that is used to perform a function each time there's a re-render on a page. Then we'll be looking at the use context hook that allows us to share state from page to page. Then we're using use params, which allows us to get parameter values from the URL endpoint. Like, let me say this is a parameter. We'll look into that, but let's first get started with the use state. Okay, now let us say you had a value here, var, you have value here, and you're trying to give it the value of Bob. Now if you want, let's say when you click this button, because this is a button, if you click this button and you say, when I click this button, the value of value is supposed to change from Bob to Grace. Let me have a little div that has our value of Bob. So it will be value, high value, which is hi Bob, and we're going to have a button. Whenever we click it, it's going to change the value to Grace. And we have Grace over here, and we can actually console log that, and it's going to be console log value. I'm actually going to see that the value here is going to be Grace, but our value here is still not going to change, and that is because HTML is static. Let us go back to this page. Now you're going to see that when we click this, have we saved? Yeah, when we click this, it's going to print Grace, but our value Bob does not change, meaning that the value actually changed, but the value that has been recorded in the browser hasn't changed, because state doesn't just change automatically. You have to kind of refresh the page, and how you do that is by using the use state hook. Now use state hook manages the content of the page. That each time you want to actually have content updating on the page, it will cause a re-render, which doesn't actually cause the whole page to reload, but just the state on the screen to re-render. So let us see what that looks like. Set value. Set value, this first value is the value which is actually going to hold your state. Then the second one is a function that is used to update the state. So then a hook is what we call to create these 2 variables. And then that I'm adding is just type safety, which allows us to give more strict rules to our data types or whatever values that we hold. So saying we're constraining this value to only strings. And one is that it comes as a constant, meaning that the reason why this is erroring is because you cannot assign a value to a constant. And to change that constant, you actually have to use the set value function. And doing that means that we have to use set value is equals to Grace. And now we have Grace. Now, what you're going to realize that when I refresh this, is it's first going to print Bob, and that's because it's first going to have the value Bob stored. Then when it's done with the function, it's going to re-render the content and have Grace being put on the screen. I hope that kind of makes sense, because before we had Bob, so what we're console logging, you think we're setting the value to Grace, but when you console log, we're still seeing Bob. Yes, it's first going to complete this function, then cause a re-render. And that's basically it. So when I click this, it's going to it's actually printing Grace, because that's what the Grace is now there. But before, it's Bob first. Let's do that again, have a look. So when you click this, you first see Bob, then you see Grace next. Then it's first going to have that value, finish the function, then update it. Yeah, I said that like twice, so I don't know if it's so unclear. You can always share a comment about what you'd want more clarity on. All right, let's go back. So let us look at the use effect function, or rather hook. So the use effect is used to perform a function each time the screen re-renders. And now this is an arrow function. An arrow function is, well, it has an arrow. It is a little bit different from okay, I'm not supposed to be explaining TypeScript to JavaScript because this is not the course for that, but you put your function here. It can be any kind of function. Even this function works there, right? You can also write that. I mean, it won't throw an error. So let's go back to this, and let's say in the use effect you want to fetch data. Now this I'll tell you is that you can't actually have asynchronous code within the use effect hook. Like you can't make the use effect arrow function asynchronous, but though you can call asynchronous functions without making them wait. I'll actually show you that by writing that down. So let's have const, then you have fetch data, then equals, then this, then this, and that, and this. Then make this asynchronous. Then you have the wait function. Then new promise res of type any arrow function. Then you have set timeout is res, and you give it 3 minutes. Yeah, that's good. So now what I meant is that we can't have the await and fetch data at the same time. You see that we can't have that. So when I do async, we can't actually have a synchronous code in a use effect. Yeah, so it's best that you just have a function within here and just call it like this. So, and that's how you call it. It will be asynchronous. Actually, let us demo that. To be called loading, set loading. Let's say use state. Then you have a boolean. Then loading in the beginning is always equals to true, because, well, is it loading in the beginning? Is it fetching data? Yes. So when you're done fetching the data, you set loading to false, right? And yeah, let us have that in a div here. And let's have a ternary function loading. If it's loading, you want to let me say have loading here. Then if it's not loading, you can just have data set. Perfect. Now let us have a look at how that works. So it's already done that, so you can see that it will wait for 3 minutes, so 3 seconds, then have the data set after that. So, and that's basically how the use effect works. This little array over here is used to have dependencies that will trigger a re-render. What I mean by that is that when I have, for example, let me say value here or loading here, if the value of value changes by any chance, or the value of loading changes, it will trigger this function. It will trigger the use effect, causing whatever content is on that screen to re-render. But if you want it to re-render only once, you just leave it blank. Yeah, so that's how you use that. So something I forgot to say is that the set value can also have an arrow function inside it, or rather a function that captures even a previous value. So meaning that I can just have prev value here, and I can actually just append it to this prev value, and meaning that I'm going to actually have Bob Grace. Rather, the previous value is Bob, and now when you click this button, you're going to set it to the previous value and Grace. Yeah, so when I click this, you're actually going to see Bob Grace. Make sense? Yeah. So when I click this again, I'm actually going to have Bob Grace, right? Yeah. So yeah, then this is something else I think that was important to mention. Yeah, okay, let us now look at the use context. Now, use context, for example, if I want to share the value of value to, let me say, the page called new. If new is not a child of home, I would have to, it would be really hard. But if it was a child, I could do props, I could send it as a prop. And that becomes really hectic if you have a child and you want to send it from one parent of, like, let me say, the first node to the parent of, like, let me say, the fourth node. So you have to pass it as a prop from one child to the other, which becomes really hectic. Yet you could just use the use context hook, which I'm going to show you in a bit. What you need is to just import the create context from React, and let us initialize interface and call it idata, and we're going to have value here, which is going to be a string. I'm going to have our set value here, and let's have it being an empty arrow function. What I'm creating right now, oops, I think it's supposed to be the default value field. Let me just have a const data here, and it is going to be equal to this, and this is a comma, this is supposed to be an empty arrow function, and this thing is actually throwing a yellow thing, which I was trying to avoid by actually making an interface interface. I call it idata, and we're going to have value, which is a string. We're going to have set value, which is going to be whatever this is, because we're going to take it away from here, right? We're going to take it away from here, and we're going to have it being over here, right? Yeah. Let's import that again. What is this? No, what is this? It is of this type. Let's copy that and just paste it over here. So data is of type idata, and to create a context, you just because we're going to be needing it anyway, also we're going to export it. Export context provider is equal to create context, and we're going to say it's of type idata, and we're going to give the default of data. And now, for us to be able to pass these values, the value of value and set value to our home, we're going to have to pass it. We're going to have to first wrap all our context in a provider and give it a value of value and set value, close that, and just put these routes inside that provider. When you're done with that, we can now access these values that we put here in the home. How do you do that? You just have const and just have value, set value, and just have the use context hook, and we just have a context provider which we exported from the app folder. We see you actually exported it from here, and you can import it from here and use it, because you're saying you're referring to this context. You're referring to this context whose values are going to be value and set value. And now in here it's supposed to run as normal. And also the beauty of it, let me create a link, because link is like the anchor tag of React that allows us to navigate from one page to another without actually having to refresh the page, which is really cool. So let's put any number here, because we have a wildcard that accepts any ID or anything that looks like an ID. So we have stroke 343. So in here we're also going to do the same thing, but I'm just going to get value. Const value is equal to use context provider. We're going to say new value. Now here we have a link, and it's leading us to our new page, because that's what is element over here. So when I come back to this page and I reload it, oh, I forgot to give this link something to new. Now when I click to new, it will take us to new Bob. Now when I do this, I can actually even see the state as it was. You can see Bob Grace, which is quite cool. Now the last hook I want to look at is this ID. How am I supposed to get this value? Like, let me say this ID is what is going to be used to fetch. It is the key attribute to fetching maybe say data for a specific row in a database from the backend, and you pass it through the parameter. Now that's why I use the use params hook. So what you're going to do is have the const, and whatever that param name is, just have ID over here, and it's going to be equal to use params from React Router DOM. You see, it is actually coming from React Router DOM, so meaning that it's coming from the router. So have ID there. So let us just log it there and just print it out. So we have 343. So whatever I actually put here, like really anything, is going to be our ID, which is really cool. Yeah, and basically that's it about the use params. That's all you need about the use params. So if there's any question or anything you'd like to ask, you can leave it in the comments. Like and subscribe, and feel free to reach out and support my content, share, and yeah, that's it. Next time, peace out.